Hey everyone, welcome back to Kubrick Corner with me, Sean Wilson. So a bit of a scene setting change today. Ta-da! With Christmas coming on, I have decamped. Hopefully this brings a little bit of sparkle to proceedings as we wind down what's been an interesting half year of movies, given that cinemas only reopened back in like mid-May. I suppose it's technically just over half a year's worth of movies, and no doubt by now many of you will have seen Spider-Man No Way Home, which is what I'm here to talk about now. I will say up front, and this should be evidently clear from the video title as well, this will not entail spoilers. I will endeavor to do a spoiler filled kind of revisit of the movie if I so wish, but I'm going to respect people's wishes, and I'm not going to give things away just for the sake of it, because I appreciate that although the movie is breaking box office records at the moment and is indicating that lots and lots of people, quite pleasingly, are turning out to the big screens going to see it, I'm not going to assume that everyone watching this video will have seen it. So I'm not going to give away anything but the most basic, brief plot details, the stuff that's basically revealed in the trailer, because what's in the trailer is fair game. I don't really feel the need to rake over it because the trailers have become some of the most watched trailers in movie history. And I imagine most people know what the parameters of it are, but very, very briefly, picking up from the end of Spider-Man No Way Home, Peter Parker Spider-Man, Tom Holland in his third solo Spider-Man movie, has had his identity leaked by the vengeful Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio, Jake Gyllenhaal. So Mysterio framed Peter Parker for his death and then exposed his identity to the wider world, which was then picked up by the New York rag, the Daily Bugle, as represented by J. Jonah Jameson, a returning J.K. Simmons, who's now being reimagined as this kind of like Alex Jones style hectoring online figure. Peter is obviously completely discombobulated by this. The world now knows who Spider-Man is, and he starts to get harassed, but also MJ, Zendaya, and Ned, Jacob Batalon, start to get harassed as well, to the extent that they realize they can't get the college admissions that they want. Peter is more distraught by the impact this is having on the lives of his friends and loved ones. Obviously, Aunt May, Marissa Tomei is affected as well. That he goes to Doctor Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch, who is also resident in Manhattan, and says to Doctor Strange, look, the revelation that I'm Spider-Man is ruining the lives of those closest to me. Can you basically cast a spell that will reverse the consequences of Quentin Beck, Mysterio revealing my identity? And then the spell goes wrong. We then get the emergence of the multiverse that was alluded to in Far From Home, and we subsequently get the emergence into the MCU of several non-MCU villains, including Green Goblin, Willem Dafoe, who I have to say steals the show in this, Doctor Octopus, played by Alfred Molina, and Electro, played by Jamie Foxx, and so on and so forth. That is it as far as the story is concerned, because there are a lot of sort of revelations, big and small, studied throughout the movie. Some of them emerge rather casually, some of them are flagged up rather overtly and in an explicitly fan-pleasing kind of way. There was one moment in the screening in which I saw the movie in which people actually really got very, very excited, and they actually sort of cheered and clapped, and that's lovely. That's a lovely, heartening thing after what's been, let's face it, 2021 has been another fairly grim year in terms of COVID, and now dealing with the revelation of the new Omicron variant, or Omnicore variant, as I like to call it. People need this escapism. People need this big screen escapism. People need the symbolism of Spider-Man to rally behind. People need Spider-Man to act as this kind of celebratory, magnanimous big screen symbol who can unite people of all ages and stripes under the umbrella of the big screen experience. And certainly in the screening I went to, and it was a public screening, it wasn't a press screening, I didn't get to a press screening of this. The public screening had people of all ages, all backgrounds, everyone was in there. It was very busy, and this was great. This wasn't necessarily a cause of panic for me. I was actually really pleased to see this. And it's always a gamble going to public screenings of big blockbuster movies like this. You never know how people are going to behave. I'm quite lucky because most of the time now I can opt out of public screenings and go to preview screenings where 9 times out of 10 people behave. I've explained this before on Kubrick Corner, but I went to public screening. People were generally pretty well behaved, and people were there and they were invested in the film. And that's good, because this is a film made for the fans. It is in many ways an extended piece of it. It's an extended piece of fan service that rolls out over the course of 2.5 hours, that is essentially, it is meant to cap off Tom Holland's solo tenure as Spider-Man, although, Sony producer Amy Pascal is now saying that he's going to be back for another one. And we now know that the multiverse, the concept of the multiverse, is now real as far as the MCU is concerned, and what's that going to do, and blah, blah, blah. And that's all good. It's the thing is, I think what one has to reckon with, and I'm aware that I'm recording this interview after the movie has been out now, released to the public for several days. So lots of people have already expressed their reactions to this movie. Most of the critics have expressed their reactions. So I'm kind of playing catch up with this. I mean, the question is this: are you happy with a movie that plays out as an extended piece of fan service? Now, I think on the one level, the fact that Spider-Man No Way Home understands its audience as effectively as it does is in and of itself very, very commendable. It knows what the fans want. It knows how to time its revelations for maximum emotive impact. And I think one ought to underestimate that at one's peril. Director John Watts, producer Kevin Feige, composer Michael Giacchino are all clearly singing off the same hymn sheet in terms of like, right, let's give the fans what they want. I have to be honest, I think that now that the concept of the multiverse has been broached within the MCU, what I wanted with this movie, and again, I'm trading around spoilers here, I wanted this movie to cast the net wider. I wanted basically this to be as imaginative in live action form as Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was in animated form. And make no mistake, I think Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is brilliant. And I don't think No Way Home is up to that level. Again, I think what it does is it's insular. This movie looks inwards towards story threads that have already been raked over, both in the live action MCU movies and also the live action non-MCU movies, the Sam Raimi and the Sam Raimi movies, and also the Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man movies as well. So that for me is a disappointment. I don't, we're now 3 Tom Holland solo Spidey movies in. As far as Spider-Man on the big screen is concerned, this goes back to 2002. I don't really want to see these movies now going over things we've already dealt with. What I want is for a huge expansion. I want things to happen that genuinely take me by surprise. In the manner of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which did that several times over. That was a genuinely imaginative, breakneck, hell for leather, let's make this really surreal, real imaginative movie. With the greatest respect, No Way Home is not that. And I know what people will say. It's like, well, you've got to invest in the long game with this. This is the first MCU movie that's explicitly shown the existence of the multiverse. Like, we have already played the long game with this. I mean, Tom Holland has been Spider-Man since 2016, since he turned up in Captain America Civil War. We have been playing the long game with this for quite a long time now. And it's slightly dramatically inert and unsatisfying seeing the MCU close ranks and just rake over things that we've already seen before, albeit tweaked. So that, I think, is a problem. But to play devil's advocate, it knows what the fans want. However one reacts to this movie depends on whether you think it's actually a folly or an advantage to play that explicitly to the fans. For me, some bits of it work. There's one shot in particular which did make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I've got my own kind of Peter Tingle moment. There are other bits that frankly are rather cringy and rather ham-fisted, but those moments have happened all the way throughout the MCU, to be honest. So it's not fair to really highlight this movie on that basis. What it does have in its advantage, in its arsenal, is a brilliant performance from Tom Holland, who is fantastic. I think he might be my favorite Spider-Man out of everyone who's played it so far. And I say that as an OG Spider-Man fan. I was there when Tobey Maguire netted his first web as Spider-Man in 2002. So for me to say that about Tom Holland is really the highest of compliments that I can pay. He's brilliant. He gets the naivete, the earnestness, the eagerness, the fact that he, out of all the actors who've played Spider-Man so far, he most explicitly plays him as a naive young kid, somebody who is always willing to put good faith in those around him. But that faith is very often let down and betrayed. This has happened several times, and these themes crop up again in No Way Home. to much more devastating effect than they have in the previous Tom Holland MCU movies. And I do think one of the great things about this movie is there are consequences, because one of the problems I've had with the Tom Holland MCU Spider-Man movies is they for me, they don't really have the pathos or the danger that the first two Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies had. I mean, Spider-Man 2, I would say, is the best Spider-Man movie ever made. And you know, those glimpses of real danger have only appeared intermittently within the Tom Holland ones. In this one, finally, you do get a sense of emotional devastation. And okay, the stakes have now been escalated. And out of that comes, actually, I think, a message that is all the more powerful given what we've been through with COVID and what we're continuing to go through with COVID, which is don't give in to bitterness and to rage. You know, you have to learn from your mistakes. I mean, making mistakes and being knocked down. I'm going to start quoting Chumbawamba in a minute, but you know, you get knocked down and then you get up again. That is what makes Spider-Man who he is. Spider-Man has to basically rise above the noise and take the knocks, very vicious knocks, emotional and physical. And that basically forms the armor, the emotional armor of who Spider-Man is. And I think the awareness of the character in No Way Home, combined with Tom Holland's brilliantly intuitive performance, is fantastic. I think that works really well. Really great performances across the board. I've got to cite Willem Dafoe, who can go from apparent sincerity to leering kind of bug-faced psychotic creepiness is really well exploited in this. And you know, when Green Goblin, the mask is ditched early on, because Willem Dafoe's face can be scary enough on its own terms without the need of a mask. I mean, films like Wild at Heart, the David Lynch movie, proved that. And director John Watts recognizes that Willem Dafoe's face is really the greatest special effect that he as an actor has got. And that's really well done. He's really good as Norman Osborn, Green Goblin, in this. So I think that for the most part, again, you know, I can't go any further than that. I think for the most part, I enjoyed it. I think the message is very, very admirable. The fact that when you're in a state of duress, it's tempting to give into anger and to bitterness and to rage, but you have to pick yourself up. You have to basically take the moral high ground, no matter what mistakes you might have brought on yourself and on your loved ones. You have to rise above that. And I think that's a very, very empathetic message. I think that is extended very, very well throughout the movie. There are several bits that had me, you know, really almost leaping out of my seat with excitement. Several other bits that were frankly quite cheesy. I think very, very, very fine performances. From here on out, I would like the MCU to cast the net or the web wider. That's my personal thought on it. I think there's a terrific score from Michael Giacchino, who, you know, it puts a choral iteration on the main Spider-Man theme. Things get very operatic, very apocalyptic, and the variations that he puts his main Spider-Man theme through a brilliant. Listen out for quotations of other themes from other composers that have been littered throughout the live action Spider-Man universe as well. So I don't think it's not a classic. I know a lot of people have raved about it. I know it currently stands, I think, at about 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's not that good for me. I mean, again, for me, Spider-Man 2, as in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 2, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse are still the very best Spider-Man movies that have ever been made, because those show a real breadth of imagination and a real sense of urgency and danger and character pathos all mixed together in this complex brew. No Way Home doesn't quite get to that point for me, but it is a solid entry. It's a solid entry as a film, but it allows Tom Holland, at the very least, it allows Tom Holland to build on an already impressive depiction of Spider-Man in terms of how he's allowed to grapple with the character's frailties, his vulnerabilities, his essential likability, because this was always the thing about Spider-Man. Spider-Man is in many ways the most relatable of all superheroes because of how young he is and how many mistakes he makes. I think the filmmakers do get that. And the way they articulate it in this is choppy and all over the place. And it's ultimately cheesy and sincere. It's inspiring and underwhelming. But I think do go and see it on a big screen if one is not too worried about COVID, because I saw it in a packed screening full of people and people seem to be really enjoying it. And it seems to be a nice valedictory experience with which to round off, a very turbulent year for the cinema industry. It gives people what they want. You've got loads and loads of spectacle to spare in there. And I can't really say any more than that without otherwise I risk going into spoiler territory, and I don't want to do that. I want to respect people who haven't yet seen it. So this might well be the final Kubrick Corner video that I'm going to make in 2021. Stay safe, everyone. Happy Christmas. And if you do see Spider-Man No Way Home, drop me a comment below, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. And I will see you in 2022. Au revoir.